Welcome to another episode of Unleash Your Inner Legend with Hollie Kitchens. Today, you guys are in for a treat as I have adventurer, like investor, serial entrepreneur, crazy world traveler, so many names I could call this guy, but let's just leave it at Easy Pay Direct founder, Brad Weimert. How are you?
I am good. How about yourself? I appreciate you having me on.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I feel like this has been something I've been wanting to do is having you on the podcast for quite some time. I'd say probably years actually. So yeah, thanks for being on. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Likewise.
Beautiful. Well, as we all know, success leaves clues. And Brad, I think it's safe to say you have more clues than probably Blue's Clues has. So let's start this episode with can you share with the listeners how you became the badass business owner and thrill seeker that you are today? Like, what's your story?
Yeah, I'll give you the consolidated one. I'm sure you can find the long drawn out one at a bar with some bourbon with me at some point. But the short form of this is I grew up really. I would say you'd put the label troubled youth on me growing up, and I found commission only sales when I was 18, and that was the first time in my life when it was really clear to me that I could just do more and get more outcome. And I finally had a mechanism where the more action I took, the more I would get out of it. And this was like a magic trick to me. It was all of a sudden the world was fun and exciting, and I could do things completely above board. And I knew that I had the sort of ambition, motivation to execute things before, but I didn't have a good vehicle. And so sales was that first vehicle. Um, Fast forward 10 years, I kind of I accelerated really fast in sales. I was very good at the place I was at. But that is not the only skill that you need in business. So that was the only thing that sort of got me into business was the things that I learned in sales. But it took a long time from there to figure out the rest of the business world. And I would say I'm still very much figuring it out. But sales was the foundation.
I love that. So, obviously you have for those who don't know Brad, we'll definitely show at the end how you guys can follow his journey. But you're like everywhere. You have all these experiences that you're constantly doing. I don't even know like what country you're going to be in next. So saying that you have obviously, like you said, trouble youth, which is interesting, and I feel like that's kind of a common. I would say a lot of people that I know that have the entrepreneurial spirit in them is born from that. But with that being said, it's very clear that you have a lot of life experiences. What would you say is a pivotal life experience that shaped into that entrepreneurial and marketing spirit that you have today? And then how does that continue to influence your journey from moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, broad stroke, it is sales, right? But I think when you dig into that and look at why sales is a good tool to learn from, you can take that lesson across a million other experiences. Um, I've done a little bit of endurance athletic stuff, and so I've got some pretty cool adventures down that path. And as I went down that path, my mother uh, liked to say, "Listen to your body." And for anybody that's done any sort of intense athletic endeavor, that's the last thing that you want to do when you're doing a long endurance thing is listen to your body. And I understand the sentiment, right? But the ultimately through the endurance experience, I learned to focus on performance over comfort. And what I started to tell myself was, fuck your feelings. It doesn't matter how I feel in a given moment. It's not about whether I'm comfortable or not in this moment. It's, am I going to perform the outcome that I'm after? And for those things, I knew that my body would hold up if my mind held up. But the trick there is what I learned in sales ultimately, which was that if you have no reference points at all that you're a winner, that you've done something successful, it's very hard to trick yourself into believing that. So you need to start stacking these reference points that let you know, hey, I can have success in this area. And in sales, that means every little sale matters. That means you don't go after the big swings all the time. You get the base hits and you get them routinely. Because if you can keep stacking that and get your closing percentage higher and higher, or just work on it, get it to improve, you're giving yourself proof that that thing is possible, right? And that's true in every corner of life. The nice thing about sales is it's this little microcosm of the world that applies to everything else. And I think endurance is the same way. But for me, that's really the cornerstone is, hey, how do I, when I'm going off on a new thing, how do I get the little wins routinely that will keep me going and prove to myself that I'm capable of doing it?
That's awesome. I love that. Definitely fuck your feelings. That's great. It is definitely mind over matter for sure. I will say this: you are hands down the most disciplined person that I know. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm going to bed and I'll hop on Instagram and I see that you're just starting your day as I'm turning in. So, with that being said, as someone that's known for having that exceptional discipline, what are the key habits and routine that you have in play that you would say contribute to your consistent success as an entrepreneur? As you drink water, look at you hydrating.
I think water is water is critical to life, and this actually is this is a really good example of it. I have a bunch of little rules in life that um, look, time and a place for exceptions to almost everything, but
Yeah.
one of them is that if there is water nearby and I think about drinking, drink the fucking water. And there are times when you think about having the water in any given life experience that you're having where you're like, nah, that's not the one I want right now. Drink the water and then drink the other thing if that's how it's going to be, but drink the fucking water. And those rules that you can put in place ahead of time are really, really serving. It's how do you eliminate the emotional choice in the moment to make those things easier and make them just happen, make them habit. And so there are lots of other ones in my life. But another, and these are small, silly examples, but the principle applies. If I'm sitting down and there is a charger nearby, I'm plugging in my phone. And guess what? Downstream of that, I never have a dead phone. The number of people that I'm out with where their phone dies at some point in the night, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
That's
You're an adult. You're better than this right now. But it's those little rules that lead up to the rest of it. And so the discipline factor, the question is, what rules can you create that make it easier for you to execute in the moments when you think that you might not? And the second is think about the moments when you might not and make the fucking rules. But you have to fast forward through to the most difficult part and think, hey, how am I going to handle this in the future? And if you know that there's a likelihood you're going to have an issue, premeditate, right? Make a decision ahead of time so that you know, hey, when I'm struggling with this later, I have some mechanism. Either I've already made the choice or I already have some other thing that I know is going to help me with it in that time. But do not, do not leave it to your own, willpower and strength in the moment to try to make a tough call because you'll probably fuck it up.
correct. I love that. So this is going to be such a cliche question, but I'm just curious because, like I said, like I see you start your day so early, and you pretty much I feel like would start it every day. So what does your typical morning routine look like?
Um, at this point, I think this goes this goes back to not allowing it to be willpower. I don't even think I have the capacity to sleep in early at this point,
Yeah.
um, and I don't know that that's a good thing. There are times when I probably should just stay in bed and get more rest, but it's so ingrained and conditioned at this point. I and there are exceptions to this rule, but I get up at 5:45. I do coffee, read, write, like do some light planning, usually hit the gym. And now it's sauna after the gym, cold plunge for a very short period of time. And then I'm into the office. And I'm usually in the office from 8 to 5 or 6, and then on to the evening. And the evenings vary wildly based on the phase of life that I'm in.
That's awesome. So let's talk connections. Outside of being super disciplined and just a badass business owner, you're very well connected as well. You're always surrounding yourself, I feel like, with the best, and you always seem to be in the right room with the right people. How do you cultivate and maintain those deep relationships with individuals who are passionate about their respective areas in life, especially the realm of entrepreneurship?
Uh, that can be tough. I think that uh, my guiding principle of life, and it took me, I think I figured this out maybe 10 years ago. I was doing I can't remember what endurance event I was doing, but I think I was climbing mountains or something, and somebody said, why do you do that? And I had to I had to ask myself that question, and I thought, why do I don't know. Why do I do these things? And my sort of the 10-year-old version of myself uh, was like, because I fucking can. And I was like, well, that's not a very helpful answer. So I started to think about it, and I realized that the most significant thing that I got from these physical adventures was relationship. And it was both the relationship that I was developing with myself through it, and also the relationship with the other people that I was involved with. Um, when you are, and that led me to think, okay, well, how do you cultivate relationships deliberately? And that led me to this idea that unique experiences and emotional engagement are the fastest way to drive relationships. So if you are at the same place all the time with people, it's never unique. And so, yeah, the relationships can thrive and be different. But if you are across the world and you run into somebody that you don't particularly like, you typically greet each other as if you are best friends, because you're in this totally unique environment. And all of a sudden, you're looking for a connection, right? Something unique in that space, to make it, to normalize it. And so I think anytime you're in a unique environment, you have a higher likelihood of driving the relationship. And the emotional engagement part could be anything, but it's, for me, it's athletic, typically. But it could be anything else too. It could be a moving play or movie or show, or drinks or something, right? Um, so I started to be much more deliberate about creating relationships through that lens and figuring out what I could do that was different to drive the relationships. Um, from an entrepreneur's perspective, I am I felt like I was consistently bouncing between the fun relationship building stuff and then working on my business. I'd go off on an adventure, and then I'd eventually be like, ah, shit, I got to get back and do the business thing. And I go back and do business. And I was toggling. And through this discovery process, I started to think, all right, well, how do I do both here? And so now I'm looking for unique events that are filled with high performing people. And frequently in my world, those are entrepreneurs. I don't particularly care if they're entrepreneurs or just high performers in any space,
Yeah.
because the character traits, values, driving force in their life tend to be very similar with high performers, whatever they're doing. If it's a high performing, pottery maker, they're super interesting because they're so into this craft, right? And their attention to detail is as high as it is with anybody else in the world. So I think that that's at least some of my perspective on that. And I can get tactical with it and how I run my life, but those are the guidelines for it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like, speaking of unique experiences, like, they're very like memorable as well. Like, I can tell you this. Like, I think 2 nights ago, I was telling the Cabo story when we were in Cabo about. That's another story for another time. But just stuff like that. And you have those experiences with people, and they just kind of get ingrained in your brain. So with all that being said, you've helped some major companies. I'm talking about companies like Keep, or most of us still call them Fusionsoft, Digital Marketer,
Me
the
too.
Rocket Company. Yeah, I know, I still do. I still even type it in the URL. But that relentlessness, I would say, to your dedication of creating the right connections with the right people, I feel like would have a direct correlation with landing those clients of that caliber. What advice would you give to somebody who's just now getting started? Maybe they don't have the availability to join a $40,000 a year mastermind. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out, to how to build those deep connections and thrive in those unique challenging situations, both personally and professionally?
Um, I mean, it really depends on your business. So I'm trying to think of kind of the broad strokes here. Uh, One of the underlying fundamentals is do it for free. So first of all, have a good product and work on yourself. You are only as valuable to the rest of the world as you are yourself. And so the best thing you can do with your time is becoming better personally or as a business. Period, hands down, no exceptions. If you show up to a room and you're trying to break into the next tier of person and you're not providing value, it's not going to work, right? You have to show up as somebody that's interesting.
Hmm.
And interesting people want to find other interesting people. So that's the beginning of it. And I think beyond that, that it is the do it for free idea. So it's, Gary Vee says, what's his thing? Jab, 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 hook, left
Yep.
hook, right hook. I can't remember, whatever the fuck it is.
Whatever hand
But
you.
it's exactly, but it's give, give, give,
Mhm.
ask, right? Or just fucking keep giving, and eventually it comes around, and that is a relationship first mentality, right? It's a return on relationship, not return on investment. And if you are doing that and you are providing value, you will get introduced and you will make connections. But it's being over the top with that, and where you leave a conversation and people are like, damn, that was awesome, because the relationship will drive things later. Now, look, for anybody that's brand new in business, I get it. You need money, you need to pay for life, you need lifestyle, etc. Uh, when you are pursuing large strategic partners or kind of the big fish, you can't go right for the kill, right? You can't just ask for the money. It's not going to work, and B, it's really really short sighted. So I'd say, play a strategic game and think about how you can get little wins along the way to get your credibility, get your skill set better, get your product better, whatever it is, and focus on the big ones later. And in the interim, the big ones can be built relationships. I mean, I think that's my general idea around that.
I love that. Yeah, and I think, too, it kind of goes hand in hand with everything, but I think, when you come into spaces like that and you might find yourself as a small fish in a big pond, if you will, I think a lot of people they try to be something that they're not. And I think those people who are really connected and very, admired in the business sense, they can sniff out bullshit so fast. And I think when people aren't their authentic self, and it's so easy these days to hype someone up online or to make yourself look like this or that, and the other, but at the end of the day, if you're not consistent who you are too, I think that that's a huge thing too. Cause I've been in some rooms where like someone would walk in and everyone's whispering like, oh yeah, that person's a phony or that person's this or that. And I think just, making sure you just embrace where you are in the journey and just staying true to who you are. And one thing you had said too was like, just adding value. I know like if you have, if you find yourself to where you don't have the funds available to do investments or, get into the rooms you want to get into by through a large ticket purchase, but it's connecting with those right people. And it's also thinking of it kind of like a bank account, right? Like how many deposits am I making into this connection or into this relationship? Because what's going to happen is, you'll find yourself just overdrawn if you just take. And I think one of like the classic examples I always give to somebody is like one of my good friends, Maury Showakey. I think do you know Maury, right?
I don't think so.
He's Damon John's guy. Well,
Oh,
anyways, I had connected with him, and this was like back in like 2017 when I was doing my online boutique. And you know what? Maury was awesome. I just sent him a cold email, and somehow he decided to roll the dice and give me 30 minutes of his time. But afterwards, I mean, like literally for nothing, right? So afterwards, I made the funny joke. I was like, "Hey, thanks for talking to me. I promise you, I'm not some creepy old man driving an ice cream truck." And so what I did is I went and got an ice cream scoop and put my logo on it and shipped it to them over at the Shark Tank headquarters in New York. And like maybe a month or so later, whenever he got back into the office there, he was like, he messaged me and was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so funny," or whatever. And then since then, we just became really good friends. And it's funny because the one opportunity I had for him was to be a keynote speaker at one of the masterminds that I was helping with. And it's so funny because even like last year when I had saw him, he's introduced me to somebody. He's like, "Yeah, this is Hollie. She landed me my first keynote speaking gig." So it's like those little things of like maybe you're not able to provide value because like what do you get to somebody like Maury, right? So
mm,
you just give them something that's funny, memorable, but then also too if you have that connection, you have that availability to plug them where you can. I think that's also key too to kind of help establish those
yeah,
relationship with people.
no question about it. And that, the ice cream scoop example is the unique experience, right? It's
Yeah.
something that stands out, that's different, and it's so important to do that. We, I've got a very good friend that wrote a book called Giftology, John Rulin, and I've known him for 25 years. But one of the tenets for him is to not get lost in the crowd. And so we, like at Easy Pay Direct, when we send out gifts, I don't send out holiday gifts. We send out Groundhog's Day gifts or some other absurd holiday where nobody's getting cards and nobody's getting presents. And they're like, what the fuck is this? And then the gift is super unique and over the top. And they're like, whoa. Um,
I'm curious, what
20
does one get for Groundhog's Day?
Well,
As a
that's the art of marketing, right? The question is, what messaging can you drum up with Groundhog's Day?
I love that. That's awesome.
Yep. So we'll play games with that every year.
That is so cool. That's something that's anybody can implement in their business, right? Like what's something that's the non-traditional Hallmark card holiday and go for it. That's very cool. So, I wanted to circle back on, I meant to ask you this earlier when we were talking about you doing all these crazy things like climbing mountains, riding bicycles. Like, you rode a bicycle like from like California to Boston or something wild? Where
I did. Yeah, I rode a
yeah,
bicycle from Los Angeles to Boston.
it's crazy. You know that they have cars these days, right?
Yeah, that was a long bike ride.
Well, and obviously putting yourself in those types of environments where you have a lot of time in your head, like you said, mentally, physically, all these other things. In what ways would you say those intense physical adventures of pushing your physical limits have contributed to your self-discovery and understanding your capabilities as a person and as an entrepreneur?
I mean, it's massive. It's just not. It's I don't know any. Look, there are definitely parallels in life, but that one is such a simple one because you feel like you do not have the capacity to move forward, right? You feel like your body is done, done, done. And it's not like you're sitting at a desk and you're like, oh, I'm too tired to read right now or write right now. We all know that feeling. But
Mhm.
physically, it seems like this crazy hyperbolic example of like, I'm going to die right now. That's the internal driver when you first start doing things. And by the way, it doesn't matter how long the distance is. Uh, Absolutely. It matters relatively how long it is to your baseline. So if the furthest you've ever run is a mile, 2 miles is going to fucking crush you. And it's going to feel like, oh my God, this is the worst. And if you've run, uh, you know, 30 miles, 35 is going to be the stretch, but it's not going to feel as bad as going from 1 to 2. So understand that how you internalize these things is all really relative. I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for the person that gets off the couch to run their first mile.
Yeah.
Uh, and I have appreciation and respect for the person that pushes it from 20 to 30, but it's not the same mental struggle. So I think there are lots of things that have gotten there, but the biggest one is this consistent reiteration that my feelings don't have to dictate my behaviors.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. That is so good, actually. Good job. Good job there. Snaps for you. That's a good quote there. So with all the crazy cool things that you're experiencing, what is your next adventure that you're going to be on?
Well, my adventure right now, my large adventure is really is Beyond a Million, is the podcast. The
Yeah.
the physical, yeah, the physical things that I've been doing, the endurance stuff, I've kind of got on hold for a minute. And the biggest struggle with that is I'm used to having this mental outlet and emotional outlet and physical outlet. And as I pull away from spending hours at a time on a bike or, hour, 10, 15, 20 hours on my feet. Um, as I pull away from that, life is different, right? And the path to clear your mind, the space that you have to think, your body handles it differently. And so the question is, where does that energy go? How do you sort of resolve those things internally? And it's sort of what you're asking about, right? What's the parallel? But you have to be very conscious in those moments of if you're used to getting these dopamine hits in one way, when you move to another chapter and to another part of your life, you should think about consciously, how am I going to get these dopamine hits in the new place? And if you don't think about it consciously, just like I was saying with the end of a long, tough struggle, you're going to make a bad decision because you haven't thought through it ahead of time. So, right now, one of my focal points is the podcast is Beyond a Million. And I am, as You're forced to sit down and be tremendously present with somebody for a significant period of time with no interruptions. Frequently, for me, I'm in studio, so I'm under lights, with mics, alone, with people watching us,
Yeah.
and that level of focus is a new struggle.
Mhm.
And specifically in life today, we're so used to, I mean, how many fucking times when you're sitting down do you grab for your phone or like just you don't even have control. Like you just find yourself grabbing for your phone to check something. Um, so it's a new struggle of sitting and having sort of long form conversation with no distractions. Um, and that's my current adventure. And it's nice because it's completely aligned with the rest of my world, which is I'm interviewing 8, 9, 10 figure entrepreneurs on sales, marketing, operations, technology, taxation, and I get to dig in to things that are going to serve me in the rest of my life. But it's still this ever evolving process of being good at interviewing, staying present, listening, um, and figuring out, how it serves both me and that person.
100%. Yeah, I just like looking back from my very first interview to like now. I remember I was like, I had this like script and I was so busy focused on reading the next line or the next question that like I didn't even catch on to like so many great nuggets that I could have latched on and dug deeper in those conversations. So, yeah. And that obviously I still struggle with that too, like with being completely present. Like you said, we live in the world of distractions where we're always like, squirrel, what's this? What's going on over here? Trying to like meerkat around, trying to see what's going on. And it's, you know, laser beam focus for sure. So you mentioned your podcast. Obviously, people tuning in, they love podcasts, hopefully, or else they're just, maybe they just love this show. I don't know. But regardless, for those who love to consume the podcast, I'm assuming Beyond a Million is available on all the main platforms of podcasting. Is there somewhere specific that you would love for people to go in and, just tune in or subscribe?
Yeah, all the main platforms. We started pushing things in video on YouTube several months back, and you should definitely go there and check it out. I personally, I usually am ingesting things on the audio platforms,
Yeah.
but I really like seeing the video too. So the
You know,
video is great.
I love that Spotify had bought out Anchor. So now you can do like, I mean, if you guys are listening to this podcast on Spotify, you will actually see our beautiful faces on the screen because I think it's cool how Spotify now allows you to upload video podcasts too. So that's a really cool thing too. I agree with you on that.
Yeah, one of the main differences for us on YouTube is we started, we do all of the short form versions of it as well. And those tend to perform much better than the long form because the long form is, it's an hour or an hour and a half or 45 minutes, whatever. The short form stuff, having curated 10-minute clips that are digestible, that's the stuff that people want in video because you can tolerate sitting for 10 minutes in video.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, during the workday or morning or whatever. And having an hour and a half to sit and watch a video, podcasts are so nice because you can digest them anywhere, right? You can
Mhm.
be in the gym, you can be running, you can be biking, you can be driving. And you can't do that with video the same way.
100%. Absolutely. Well, Brad, thank you so much for being on today. Before I let you get back to your scheduled day, that is very, I know it's kind of time block, very curated and perfectly. Where can listeners go to follow you and keep up with your wild journey in life?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is probably where I'm personally most active, which is at Brad Weimert, Weimert. Beyond a Million is the podcast on all the places. And then easypaydirect.com. If you have a business and you're accepting credit cards, you should probably figure out why a lot of the bigger companies do not use Stripe or PayPal or something
Yeah.
of the like.
I need to definitely connect with you as soon as we get off here offline because yeah, we've got some monkeys to deal with on that. So, anyways, but I appreciate you hopping on again. And yeah, you guys make sure to go follow Brad and subscribe to his podcast because in this last just 30 minutes, you guys can see the tremendous amount of information that is in his head. Can you only imagine a podcast where he hosts? It has to be fabulous. So, you guys check it out. And again, Brad, thanks so much. I appreciate you for being on.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Unleash Your Inner Legend podcast with Hollie Kitchens. Make sure you subscribe on all your favorite podcasting platforms, and I will see you next week.